dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice.
Rob,
You never know if it
I'm in a little panic. I'm in a bit of a pickle here.
It's okay, Matt. It's gonna be okay. Tell me what's going on. What's the problem?
So I mean, got my regular session of D&D this weekend. Players are fighting this like really cool dragon. Look, I even painted a miniature.
Very cool.
But I found out from you today that today is the release date of a new version of D&D. We've both got our new players' handbooks here, and I'm not updated.
That's correct. Okay, so here's what you're going to want to do.
Is my game going to crash? Is it going to
absolutely.
Like,
you are so
screen?
fucked. So here's what you're going to have to do. All right, so get out your ski mask and your gloves and your black jumpsuit, and you're going to want to sneak into all of your players' homes tonight.
Sure.
You have to do this tonight, or else they're going to notice. And replace their character sheets with a new one. It's in the back. You know where it is. You've seen it. Print out a new one, make them new characters, and replace them. And if they're like, "Hey, this doesn't look like my character sheet at all," gaslight them super hard.
Right.
Be like, "No, that's been your character sheet the whole time." And they're like, "What is this stat? That's not right. Like, this is different." Be like, "No, you're wrong. What are you talking about?"
Any
stop
advice
being weird.
for if they notice me entering their homes? Or
then you're going to remember when I sent you that bottle of chloroform last year?
All right.
Okay, just bring that with you.
Do that to myself. I'll chloroform myself.
Hello, everyone. It's Dungeon Master of None.
I'm Dungeon Master Matt, or a secret burglar Dungeon Master Matt.
And I'm Dungeon Master Rob. And here we are talking about, after all this time, the new release of the 2024 Player's Handbook. It's finally here. I think you can go back to the episode where they first announced this, like 3 years ago, where I think you can listen to Matt and I think, Matt, you said, "I hope I'm dead." I'm pretty sure like what you said in that episode is like, I hope I'm dead by then. Well, we're not dead.
Surprise!
We're still alive, and now we have to review the Player's Handbook.
Yes, we do. Who could have predicted there would be another edition or printing or revision of the D&D rules? Well, everyone, because they're always going to make new editions, and here we are with this one. We don't know what to call it. And if you've never experienced such a thing before, a rewriting of the rules of the multiverse, don't worry. We've been through it several times.
Yeah. Yes, we have. Let's see. 3.0 was in like
2001.
2001. 3.5 was 3 or 4 years later.
Since
I have been aware of D&D, or both of us have been through at least 4 of these changes.
5 if you count essentials. And the one time I played 2nd edition with some weirdos at a game store before I had a real game. We've been through it all. And the most important thing to remember is, first off, your old editions, some of them, depending on the printing and your DVD region, will crumble into dust. Others, the tech...
Yeah, the secret DRM inscribed into the ink of your Player's Handbook will activate, and it will crumble to ashes. So that's a bummer, but, it happens.
So I guess the serious thing to know is it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, don't panic.
There are plenty of people who continue to play original D&D, 3rd edition, 3.5, 4th edition, and with the same thing, I'm sure plenty of people will not buy the new handbook and just continue playing. In fact, Rob, for my game this weekend, I think only one of my players is even aware there's a new edition coming out and like has remembered and internalized this information. And so I'm just not going to bring it up until I get a handle on things and decide, should I make the switch, which is something we can talk about in this episode.
First of all, don't panic. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to change your game. You don't have to go out and buy the Player's Handbook if you don't want to. You don't have to take any bullshit from your players if they want to use something that you haven't had time to read up on or learn about. But also, even if you did want to change or your players did want to use something, the truth is that this book is not actually that different from the 2014 Player's Handbook. And this is admitted and by design. So if you do think you want to switch or your players are pushing you to switch, know that it will not be as dramatic as the switch from 3.5 to 4 or 4 to 5 or 2 to 3 by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I guess the big picture thing here before we get any further is that while there are some important changes in like the layout of the book and maybe with character creation, the system is very, very similar. It's a 5.5 or even a 5.25.
Yeah, and we're gonna do a second episode where we do a deeper dive on some of the fiddly bits, because Matt and I are who we are, and we gotta crunch the numbers about the new ranger abilities and spells and whatever, because that's what we do. But this episode is gonna focus on the big picture, like what's the change, what you should know, should you switch, is it
what
good?
Does it mean for your game and like running it? Will it be different? If so, how?
Stay tuned for that two-parter if you want to know the crunchy bits, though there's a lot of really good work being done out there already. We'll go into, I think, what we think is relevant and interesting, but this is going to be just, we read through it, we have some thoughts, we'll talk about what's here, what's going on.
And so to get us started, Rob, what are we actually calling this version to distinguish it between other versions of D&D? Because it is different. So the playtest was called 1D&D. Most people, when talking about it before, were calling it something like 5.5 edition. The official title is just the Player's Handbook 2014. Or sorry, 2024, which is the year as opposed to 2014. What do you want to call it, Rob?
I don't think that it's accurate to call this 5.5 because we have a 0.5 edition. And the difference between 3.0 and 3.5 is substantial. There are not massive, but significant rules changes. There are not many significant rules changes in the 2024 PHB, which we're looking at. In fact, there are very few. In fact, most of what's there is an addition. There aren't a whole lot of changes. So I don't know, man. I would call this 5.25 or 5 plus or something. It's not really different from 5th edition. It's really just like a super version of the PHB.
I'm hesitant to call it the 2024 edition. One, because the other two books in the core set are not coming out until 2025.
Right.
And it's just awkward to call it a year number, especially as we move in time. I'll probably just default back to 5.5 because 5.25, while more accurate, is this too many numbers to say. But anyway, that's what it is. It's not 1D&D. I mean, this kind of leads to my next big question that isn't about the actual game, which is, Rob, much of the hype around this edition was super silly and stupid, right? There'll be a video of some designer being like, and now barbarians can do a lot more in combat. And you look at the ability he was talking about, it's like, well, they get a +1 bonus when raging to a skill check. Who cares? I don't. But
there were a bunch of videos of Jeremy Crawford breathlessly hyping the most banal ability update I have ever heard of. Just
now allows you as a barbarian, while your rage is going, to make certain ability checks that use particular skills and make those checks using strength, regardless of what the normal ability is for those particular ability checks.
Truly uninspired stuff. So whatever their marketing team was doing was not working on me. Maybe somebody found that enthralling, but yeah.
No, not for me. But the one thing that was hyped in the marketing was that this version of the Player's Handbook would be compatible with the rest of the books published for 5th edition. Now, that was much hyped and much belly ached about when people were afraid that it wasn't. What's our judgment, Rob? Do we believe the hype of backward compatibility?
Yeah, I think this is broadly true. I do think that this is correct. There are, and we've already found a couple of, corner cases and, unique situations where the rules are contradictory or some bit of an old subclass doesn't really work. But for the most part, this is correct. You should be able to use everything from all the old UAs, all the old subclass books. We will see about the monster manual. That is maybe a question mark. But for the most part, in terms of like raw mechanics, this all is backwards compatible. Something that is a little bit more, I guess, subjective is, could you run old adventures? Could you run old encounters?
You could.
Without modifying them, given
Yes.
the changes to especially like basically like player character power levels. And that is sort of
100%.
Open question to me.
No, I would say 100%. Player character power levels have ticked up slightly, but it's, I think, insignificant enough over a broad enough like thing that it's lost in the wash of encounter balancing, which is not a science in this game anyway. So
Right.
like it doesn't matter. And like the things that I worry about as GM, like, hey, let's say they release the monster manual and there's not a stat block for this other monster that I have. Can I still use the old one? Yes, absolutely you can. Can I still use this adventure, this NPC, this magic item? Absolutely. And I think, like Rob said, except for some corner cases, things that didn't get updated because they were in some extra book, some subclass or something like that. Broadly speaking, most of those are still going to be able to slot into this new revised edition, 5.5. So I think, yes, much was sacrificed at this altar of backwards compatibility. Many things that probably lots of folks would have liked changed were not changed, but the people who wanted a 5.5, a 2024 book that's backwards compatible, yeah, I mean, as much as you can you change anything and it still be the same, that is the case here. Like, here's an example, Rob. I thought, should we redo our warlord class? And I'm like, some of the like language style could be changed. Like, there's a thing that should be like, this should be a blank action instead of you do this thing. Some things should be like capitalized that are not. But like, no, we don't need to.
We've been meaning to do another round of polish on that, but I don't think like maybe we can, like Matt said, fix up some of the language, change some of the specific references to match, but the class as written and everything we've produced for 5e, I guess this is a blessing, should still work as written. And this was a design goal, so I guess that's good. They did accomplish what they said they were going to do. Early on, there were some things where I was like, this is going to break one thing or another, but I don't think most of that made it into the new PHB.
I don't know. What would you say the biggest change is here?
I have two answers for that.
One is true and the other is a lie. Listener, can you tell which is which?
I guess, I don't know. This is actually a good question, Matt. I'm not sure what the biggest change is. Some of what they've done to classes is a big change, and the origins are a big change. But I don't know, like, how much. Weapon mastery is a big change, but that's also like a addition, so I don't know. Sorry, this is a really difficult question for me to answer.
Mine is easy because I've kind of taken a step back, but I think it's also the correct answer, which is the biggest change is in organization and presentation.
Oh, sorry. That's a better answer. Yes, sorry. That is the biggest change. And this is what I wanted to spend a lot of our time talking about, is the way they have updated and organized the PHB. Sorry, that's the right answer.
Rob, I guess I've been running campaigns with it for so long, I've forgotten how badly organized the 2014 The Old Player's Handbook is. It sucks.
It sucks. It's so awful. It's so hard to find anything.
There's no index. This one has completely moved things around, right? There's an introduction to the basic rules at the beginning with examples of play. Then it's character creation and spells. And then at the very end is a rules glossary and reference.
This is a big deal. They have made what I think is a substantial improvement to the layout and readability and functionality of the player's handbook. The rules glossary is a desperately needed addition. It is something that we have needed for 10 years. So I guess I'm glad it's here now. The index is more useful. The layout of the book is still not precisely what I think is intuitive. It's a lot closer. It's much closer. I also like all of the examples better. I like, so here's there's a lot of small things, but like one example is in the character classes chapter, there's a much more detailed explanation of the character classes and a bunch of things before you get to the class charts,
Yes.
which I think is the right decision, because as useful as the class charts are, they are visually distracting and stressful for new players. So I think this is just like one example of Wizards finally learning some lessons. Not a lot, but some.
I think it's useful, and the correct decision in pretty much every role-playing game is to go over rules first, then character creation, because how can you create a character if you haven't read the rules? However, D&D 5th edition or 5.5 is so clunky, they sort of realized they can't get all the rules of the game in before you get to the stuff that people actually like. So the rules are split between the sort of basic rules told more in like, okay, well, you this is how checks are made, and then there's exploration, and then this is the special situation of combat. And then all of the fiddly bits are moved to a glossary, which is the, kind of keyword tagged thing. So to read the rules, you kind of have to read the front half and then constantly reference the back half. So it's still, the rules are still split up, but at least they're now in 2 locations instead of 7.
When we say this is an improvement, what we mean is it's better than the 2014 Player's Handbook, which is a bad book.
It's a huge, I completely forgot how bad it was.
I haven't used it. Like I started just referencing rules directly on D&D Beyond, or just trying to remember them. I stopped using the Player's Handbook a long time ago because it's so hard to find anything. It's so poorly laid out. So this is better. Still not great, but better.
Right. For me as a dungeon master, this is a huge benefit in that if I have a really dedicated player who wanted to actually read the rules of the game, they could, and it wouldn't take them an entire lifetime. And there are examples and cool pictures of people throwing dice with their characters in the background. I like that. And then the second thing that helps me as a dungeon master is like I might actually use this book to reference at the table, as opposed to the basic rules that are free or D&D Beyond.
I kind of wanted to save this for the end, but like the thing is, you could and should maybe just print out the rules glossary itself and get a substantial amount of the benefit of this new book just there. Like that is a major part of the improvement in question, is the fact that there's now a rules glossary that it contains most, though I still don't think all of the relevant terms, but most, many more than the 2014 one. But like the rest of the book is still fine, but like the major improvement in functionality and coherence and usability is just the rules glossary, in my opinion.
Okay, I think the other biggest change for Dungeon Masters, the second biggest change, is that when you're creating new characters with your friends, character creation has been reordered and in some places restructured, so that if you switch to the new rules, for the most part, like I feel like you could take an old character and then just reference their class and see if they picked up any new abilities or the wording of any of their abilities changed, and it would basically be the same, but you'd still need to give them like an extra feat and stuff like that. But the new character thing completely reordered. Like you go class first, then you pick your origin, and then gives you a background and a feat, and then you pick your species, and then you pick your equipment.
It should be comprehensible, and it should work out the same. And like Matt said, you can easily, or relatively easily, port over a 5e character, but there are some changes. And yeah, at the very least, you're going to want to give your players a feat and maybe a couple of other things, because origins are much more powerful than backgrounds and give a lot more benefits to players.
You have to take a feat associated with your background. I was a little peeved that they didn't add a little sidebar that's like creating your own background, or let your players take a different...
You know why they didn't do that, Matt? I'm sorry. I'm tinfoil hatting here, but if they just had a thing about creating custom backgrounds, which they should have, because that's the obvious thing to do, then they couldn't sell us more books of backgrounds. I honestly think that if you just like let players pick from a menu, then they're never going to want to buy another book with backgrounds in it. And the Wizards didn't want to close themselves out of that juicy background money.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's dying for more splat books full of backgrounds, binders full of backgrounds. And the crazy thing is, if you don't let players swap things around, like which ability adjustment goes with which background, which feat with which background, it sort of means that like some classes are like all going to be sailors. So, or something like that, or some classes are all going to be
We'll have to save the
acolytes.
substantive conversation about this
Yeah.
for our next episode. But like, there are only 2 backgrounds that have strength and constitution as a bonus score, which means that every martial character is probably going to be a farmer or a soldier. And there are other like mechanical tidbits that mean that like...
Listen, have you seen how big people like J.J. Watt are? Like these corn-fed Midwestern farmers.
I'm
They're
not
the
saying that's
biggest
wrong.
guys.
I'm just saying that like maybe it should be possible for a fighter to have started out as a wayfarer or something. Anyway, we'll talk about this in greater detail some other time, but I don't really love the way that origins work. I like this package of abilities, but it should be more modular, or there should be like more options, or both. I don't know, because as it stands, there's clear mechanical best choices. Even if your players aren't big min maxers, like they're not gonna want to hurt their character just so they can say that their background is entertainer. You know, I think it's not very well implemented.
I miss the like ideals, bonds, and flaws. I thought those were kind of neat. If nothing ever was done interesting with them beyond the core rules. I love the table of trinkets that you can get at things. But I think my overall positive thing about the character creation is that at the beginning of the chapter, the way it's explained to you and players with the like sample character sheet of like where to put your shit. And I mean, the order just makes much more sense, right? Pick your class first. That's just the way it should be.
This is a small thing, and people may forget that that feats are an optional rule in the original Player's Handbook.
Oh, no longer, sir.
No longer. I like feats. I have always liked feats. I think that they are one of the interesting things about D&D that allow for cool character customization. And I had never liked that they were so hard to get in 5th edition. Mm-hmm. This changes that. Now your players get a feat at first level as part of their background, like they should. I think that's good. I think that's a great improvement that will make, one, character creation more interesting and fun, and allow for a lot more diversity in character builds. I think this is a great, simple addition. Right. I had already made this house rule for every D&D game I have run in the past 10 years. So I don't know. I'm just glad that Wizards agrees with me, I guess is what I'm saying.
The other feat thing is that all feats have an ability score improvement too. So like you don't have to worry as much about like the mechanical trade-off if you're a character building things. The other thing that really stood out to me about this chapter is there's a great like table of what the classes are, and you know like explanation.
I did like this.
And then there's also one that gives, I love this, it gives the complexity of the class. I like this because there are players that were like, I want a low complexity class. However, I think it's completely inaccurate.
This is one of the things I wrote down, and I wanted to talk about this with you. Okay, I'm glad you brought this up. This is a great idea. Right. Once again,
only someone at Wizards understood their own rules.
Yeah, I know, right? So this is good. This is a really good thing because, you know, for those of us grognards, like we already know like what everything is, but like I've played with a lot of new players and they don't know what the classes are about. And so this is, I think, a very simple organization system, but it has the class, what they like, what their primary ability is, and their complexity. This is great. This is a good thing, just like at a glance, to explain what their deal is. However, which ones are the high complexity classes, Matt? And do we agree with this?
The table here says Bard, Druid, Monk, Sorcerer, and Warlock. So, according to this table, the Warlock is more complex than the Wizard. Which is
that's weird.
1,000% false.
Yeah.
Like, it makes me so frustrated that I'm like flipping to the credits and looking for rules people. Jeremy Crawford, Mackenzie Darmus, Ben Petrosor. Come on. What? This was your job. Rules. Which ones are complex?
The Warlock has like a couple of like weird things that you have to know about, but once you know them, it is the easiest, in my opinion, the easiest casting class in the game. You have 2 spell slots. You cast all of your spells at maximum level. You get them back at short rest, and if you're not doing that, you Eldritch Blast. Like it's not actually a very complicated class. In fact, it's really easy to play compared to the Wizard.
You can never go wrong. Whatever you do,
whatever you do is the right decision as a Warlock.
Almost all your spells are useful. Almost all of the abilities you can choose are useful. You always have Eldritch Blast that hurts things. Like you could accidentally make a Wizard that's useless for like 80% of campaigns.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
You know,
if your DM is diligent about what spells you have prepared, your spell slots, you have to be very smart to play a Wizard, right? You have to make sure that you are choosing the right spells and memorizing the right spells and making smart decisions.
Choose different ones every single time you rest.
Yes,
right. That's complex. The Warlock, they can only change like when you level up. Like you have to make an effort to change.
Yes,
them.
The Warlock does this for you. Like you don't have to make very many decisions except what spells do I have. The low complexity classes, Matt. I thought this was very funny. So one of them is Fighter. I'm willing to like let this slide. I disagree strongly, but I can see how maybe if all you're doing is just running up and attacking, that might be simple. Especially with the new weapon mastery changes, I don't think this is true at all. But like, let's leave that
I
one
think
aside.
the correct answer, Rob, is there are no longer any low complexity classes.
But the one that really chaps my ass, Matt, is that the second low complexity class is
Rogue. Look at that ass. It's so chapped.
So chapped. Rogue. Right. Do you think a rogue is easy to play, Matt, either in combat or out of combat? I personally do not think so. In fact, I think the rogue is one of the more complicated classes because of the way that sneak attack works, which is to this day not intuitive and hard to keep track of. Like this is not an easy ability, and it is key to playing a rogue well.
I think the rogue player in my current campaign would agree. It is not a low complexity class. There are no low complexity classes.
There are none.
And then in the average and high ones, it's just nonsense. So don't use that guide as a guide for your players. However, the other like little descriptions of what the classes do and stuff like that, and even like what the subclasses do is kind of neat.
It's kind of neat. Some of them are better than others. The Druid likes nature. That's good. That's correct. The Bard likes performing. Okay, sure, fine. That doesn't necessarily help you figure out how you're going to play the class.
Right. It doesn't tell you what they do.
The Warlock likes occult lore. It should say Eldritch Blast. The Warlock likes Eldritch Blast, but whatever. But in general, it gives you something to work with.
Yeah, so I like the guides. I sort of mourn for some of the background like questions you could ask. It's kind of all boiled down to imagine your past and present and 6 bullet points. Yeah. And there's a little spot on the back of the character sheet for you to write your answers. It doesn't give the dungeon master or players really any advice on how to do this successfully. There's a little sidebar about session 0, one little sidebar about social interaction, but again, most of the stuff here is about spellcasting and combat. So if you're hoping for a revision of like the advice for players on the rules about like how to explore and how to role play and all the cool things you can do there, it's better than 2014, but it's not an equal 3 pillars of gameplay.
Yeah. One maybe would expect some of that to be in the Game Master's Handbook when it comes out, the Dungeon Master's Guide. It's going to be the DMG. Sorry, this is the classic. But, and this is one of the problems, that's not out yet. It won't be out for months. You, the DM, you get shit. You got nothing to work with. So,
Well, we'll be okay. We'll be okay. I think if you're wondering, like, has anything been cut? I didn't notice any spells that were cut, though obviously not every spell from every non-player handbook book made it into this, but many of them did. I noticed there's like 1 feat gone, and that there are no longer explicit rules for half elves and half orcs. But everything else, like, nothing is gone from this.
And so, if you've been paying attention, you probably know this, but obviously not every subclass that was published in all the many splat books is in here. Neither are all of the spells, species, or whatever. One notable absence, in my opinion, that I would have liked to have seen, that I think was deserved, is the Artificer. The Artificer is not in this book, which I get it. I'm still bummed. I'm like, why not? I don't know. Give us something, right? Give us the Artificer in a core book, but that's fine. There's nothing that was in the original PHB that is not in the 2024 PHB that I noticed or cared about. There are some changes to the way some things work, feats, spells, subclasses, but
many changes.
Not much, if anything, was cut.
You talked about the big, like, rule change, being weapon mastery, and I agree. But I think there's one other big change that is important for the most important people, us dungeon masters, which is complexity creep and time creep. So I was just looking at these rules and seeing, like, I you made the joke about me going to my players' houses, but the first things I looked at was like, okay, I got a bard, I'm going to look at the bard. I got a fighter, I'm going to look at that fighter and their subclass. And I noticed that more classes have bonus action things to do, and that more classes have weapon mastery, which of course is completely new, which causes more rolls to happen. So I think the biggest change, the thing I would most pay attention to if I switch, is everything going to take longer?
Everything is going to take longer. This, I think, was in some ways a needed change, but classes that didn't have good uses for their bonus actions or reactions have been given them. Every martial class, that's Barbarian, Fighter, Ranger, Paladin, now has weapon
and
mastery.
rogues.
Do rogues get weapon mastery?
Yes.
They do? Oh, my bad.
They get 2.
Now has weapon mastery, which is neat, but also complex and involves, in almost every case, most cases, a roll. Either a saving throw or some kind of extra whatever. And this is leaving aside drinking potions as a bonus action and all that. Everybody has more to do, which I think is good. But Matt's right that the sort of qualitative effect of this is a crunchier, slower game in combat, especially.
I think, like, we got here because there were a bunch of niche cases and things that the designers wanted to add to D&D Next that didn't sit, and that's the first version of 5e that didn't fit with its simple, you move and you do an action on your turn, which is very elegant and made things go very fast. And so, it wasn't spelled out in the rules super clearly, but it was like, hey, you'll have bonus actions sometimes, and only certain people get them. Sorry if you don't, you'll just be a less effective and more boring character. And their solution to that seems to be that there must be some way to build a character that completely avoids using bonus actions, but I have not found it yet. I'm certain it exists, but most characters, most of the time, on most of their rounds, will probably be using some kind of bonus action. And like Rob said, even if they don't, just normal attacks from the characters who do normal attacks are more complicated. For me, this is going to make combats take much, much longer. I don't think other parts of the game are going to take much longer, but combats will, and that's concerning to me. I guess the other solution to this would be to go completely the other way and take a bunch of things away from people and go back to that simple formula of, well, you get to do one thing on your turn. Sorry, that's it. Make that hard choice.
Yeah, one of the implicit promises of this new edition update is that it was going to streamline and simplify things, right? Fix a bunch of the rules cruft and nonsense that was complicated and slowing things down. This, I do not think it succeeded on in any way, shape, or form. I don't think it's a lot more complicated, but it is more complicated. There is...
I think it just takes more time, you know?
I just, there are more rules. They're not super hard. The new rules, I think, are a little bit more coherent. Like they've been designed to work with the system a little bit better, but they are just new rules and new options. And I don't think that it's going to be a burden for people who have been playing this a long time. It's just an addition, but it is more, and it is complicated.
D&D 5e combats we're no longer like quick and easy after the like second or third iteration of the D&D Next playtest back in 2012 or 2013. But they were still faster than, let's say...
They were faster than 4th edition, and they were faster than 3.5. I mean...
Or Pathfinder 1st edition.
4th edition after a point. But they were faster. This was the goal, and they succeeded. And listen, for all of our complaints, 5e was good for that. It was addressing a problem and a need. Then it failed to grow and evolve.
Since you mentioned this is the biggest change, we should take a moment to note the final form of weapon masteries, right? Because I think that is the biggest like mechanical rule change that isn't just like rewording how certain actions work. And again, I think this is super fun for marshals. And I love the design of some of the weapon masteries, like Graze. It doesn't take any extra time. You just do damage if you miss, right? I love like Vex and Push. You just move a thing around. But other ones, I have two problems, right? Some of them require time. Cleave and Nick require a second roll for every attack by the player. Yeah. Topple requires the DM to make a roll, so those all create time. And then some of them create extra mental load. Sap and Slow require tracking a non-condition condition, a thing that's not one of the conditions listed in the book by the GM on that specific creature. So for me, the weapon masteries didn't pass the like 5e fast, fun, let's go test.
We'll save some of this for our part 2, but I do want to talk about it because I do think it is a significant change, and everything that Matt said is right. I'm a marshals guy. I love my fighty dudes, and I have always felt a little like the redheaded stepchild of wizards. They don't get a lot of fun toys, and marshals have gotten a ton of fun toys in this edition. That makes me happy. That being said, I don't know about the implementation of this. A good example, Matt, you're so right about this, and it's so dumb, and I don't know how I would have done it differently. But
are you going to do Cleave as your example?
I was going to use Slow as my example. Actually, Cleave is the worst. We'll get to
you.
Cleave.
Give me your Slow. I'll give you my Cleave.
So Slow, you're absolutely right about this. If you hit a creature with this weapon and damage it, you can reduce its speed by 10 feet until the start of your next turn. You can't do this more than once. Matt's right. They don't have the slowed condition. It's even easier to remember something like, Sentinel reduces their speed to 0. That's easier to remember than they have 10 less speed. Here's another fun thing, Matt. The annoyingness stacks here because the untyped condition that Matt is talking about, that's annoying. That's a problem. If it was even something like how Draw Steel might do it, and say it has the condition slowed 10, that would make more sense than the way that it is written. But here's the thing: you could also take what's it called, Slasher, the feat, which gives the following benefit. Hamstring. Once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack that deals slashing damage, you can reduce the speed of that creature by 10 feet until the start of the next turn. So, if you are using a weapon with slow and as a slashing weapon, or you also use a slashing weapon, then your GM has to remember that that is actually 20 feet of speed reduction. And these things do not talk to or interact with each other or have any sort of like, that's just like you have to write down somewhere 10 minus 10, 20. This is not well implemented. There are smart ways to do this type of, like, if you want to use keywords, you want to use conditions, do it, but don't. This just feels half-assed. I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, like, the slasher slow interaction just shows the, like, hey, we didn't, like, go check all of our old feats with the new weapon masteries and, like, make sure they line up and are, like, visually distinct. It's like I think it's like the lurker feat with the blind sight fighting or something like that. They do almost the same thing, and it feels weird when you're, especially if you're a player and you're trying to choose between these. You could rewrite slow in a way that wouldn't require this, but it would require probably a redesign of the system. Some of the other ones, like cleave, it's like, why wouldn't you just say, make an attack roll? If you hit the first creature, apply the result of the attack roll to the second creature. That way you don't have to pick up the dice and roll again. It's just, I felt like no one was thinking, is this the most efficient way in terms of time and mental load to get these fun tools across? And I went back and I referenced them, and they're almost unchanged from the, like, Unearthed Arcana. I think, like, one of them is changed. And it's just like, surely they weren't all that good, first out of the can, were they?
Some of these are clear best uses of your time, right? Like, Topple is very powerful. I like that marshals can now push, pull, knock down. It was so hard to do cool martial things like bull rush and trip like you could in previous editions. And now it's not so hard, so I like that. But Topple is really strong, and there's no reason why you're not going to be toppling every single thing that you conceivably can, because then they'll be prone and you get advantage on them. And that, I
guess the trade-off is it's on worse weapons.
Yeah, but this also, the other problem here, and like this is cool for some types of marshals and not, but like it kind of encourages you to have like a golf bag of weapons so that you can like pull out your toppler and then switch to your vexer, whatever, that can be fun. There's gotta be a better way to do this. I mean, there is a
better way. So it's like you've got all the condition cards on behind your DM screen, and then you trip, they fly up in the air and they zoom in. Now, if you 5 easy payments of $14.99.
Here's another hammered tin hat conspiracy theory for you, Matt, which is that this is all designed with a VTT in mind. That they don't give a shit about how hard this is to keep in your mind and run at a table, because they are planning on making you use their as of yet unannounced VTT to run D&D 5.25.
I think we would be able to tell. There would be more stuff in here that was VTT like if that was the case. But that is a great tin hat conspiracy. I hope it gets started. I hope people pick it up. Retweet this, re-X this if you hear this. Let's make this happen. Let's spread some disinformation.
Yeah, what is that face when I spread disinformation on the internet? That's us. That's us now.
Back to things that I like. So this book, another big change, cut out a lot of the like detailed information on what it is to be a hobbit, a halfling. What it is to be a druid or whatever. And I think I kind of like that, because it means I can sort of tell my players what it is. And there's enough like visual cues and stuff, and that I don't think anything is lost. No one's looking at the art for the elves and being like, well, I thought elves were a completely different thing. And then if you want them to be, you can, because that text is just out of the game. What did you think about the removal of much of the fluff around classes and species here?
I mean, I sort of don't care, because I can fill in a lot of that myself. I do think that for new players, something is lost. I would say like one of the clearest sort of targets, one of the groups of people that would benefit the most from this book are brand new players. And for them, I do think it is kind of a bummer that the descriptive, the fluff around classes and species is missing. I think that is a loss for them.
I guess, but if I'm thinking of,
is it a big deal? No.
I can see your point. My personal preference is to have the least amount of that in here as possible, so I could be like, well, yeah, a barbarian can be this, even though it said, before in the 2014 it said barbarians come from these places. I'm like, forget about that. So I appreciate.
I will say, if the trade-off is that we have more better art, then that's an easy trade-off. I think we could have both, but like the art is so much, in my opinion, so much better and cooler and more evocative than the 2014 art that I don't really miss the rest of it, because you are given visually just so much more distinct identity and inspiration for both species and classes, in my opinion, especially classes.
I think we should do a whole episode on the art of this, because I agree with you. Overall, the art is great. I have some like things that made me go, about the art and made me think about them. I especially like the art at the beginning with the people playing the game players at the table and then characters in the background. I've seen this in a dozen other role-playing game systems, but I think it's good that it's in the flagship system, because
I liked
think
that.
That's nice.
I know it's not like original to D&D. I liked that. I thought that was a very interesting change. We may have to do like maybe we can do another video pod where we like talk about the art, because it's
for our Patreon listeners.
It's very good. It's very, very good. But it is like it says a lot more, I think, than the art in the 2014 PHP. Like it what is it? Like it has something to say. Does that make sense? Like it's trying to communicate something more distinctly than the OG, which is a choice, and one of all the decisions they've made, that's one I respect.
Tune in, go to patreon.com/Dungeon Master of None for that future episode, and you'll also, as a bonus, discover which pieces of art have been reused from previous editions of the game. I found them all.
Matt has a lot more patience for this than I do, but I'm glad you did it, Matt.
Rob, I want to talk about, so we've talked about the things that have changed and most of the things that have not changed. I have two small things for you, and then I have some closing questions for us, if that sounds okay.
Sure. I have a small thing that I
go first, Rob.
One small thing. Sorry, I should have mentioned this when we were talking about characters, that I thought was nice, a little bit like the class overview chart, is there's a standard array by class chart where it just says, if you're using the standard array, this is what we suggest for each class. Would you use this every time? Probably not. Do I think this is a very nice, like, visual? My players have struggled with this in the past. I think it's a nice thing to just be able to reference, be like, this is where I might want to put my ability scores in the standard array.
And then they do the same thing with spells or other stuff where you have to pick things, so that you can kind of like make your character and only have to make two decisions. And for some people, they absolutely want that. Nothing is taken away. It's a brilliant change, Rob. My small thing is my absolute favorite paragraph of the rules that was worth more than anything else is a sidebar in the chapter on spells. It says, creating verbal components. If you'd like to say a spell's verbal component, you may make up the words. However you make them, the goal is to create something that is easy to say and doesn't mean anything in the real world. Consider this method. Take the name of the spell, keep only one instance of its letters, and rearrange the remaining letters into words. For example, remove the second L from fireball and rearrange the remaining letters to create Berfila or Felbira. I think that's neat.
I like that too. I think that's a clever and simple change. That's neat. I like that.
I wish they had also included the 2-page chart from Baldur's Gate 3 of all the spell things too. Why not? It's just 2 pages, but this is great.
I, being a nerd, have always used some kind of garbage Latin or Greek, but this is even better and more unique. I think that's a really clever way to, at a glance, create a verbal component.
Putting in /sarcasm here, my favorite sentence from the rules glossary was this section. Per day. If a rule says you can use something a certain number of times per day, that means you must finish a long rest to use it again before you run out of uses. Just reminding us of all the baggage and the rules of things that don't make sense. That there's so many things that say per day when a day was never defined in the 2014 rules, so they had to add this in.
I felt this way about object, which is now like a distinct,
utilize
category.
Yeah.
An object is a non-living distinct thing. Composite things like buildings comprise more than one object. What does that mean? What is a non-living distinct thing? I feel like I need to pull out like a
Master
book on Aristotle
Plato,
to understand
what makes something distinct. But what
Socrates,
distinguishes?
what is an object?
Sorry, Socrates.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, all of them, all of them. We got to get all the great masters together and be like, what do you mean a non-living distinct thing? A zombie is a non-living distinct thing. Is that an object or is that a creature?
Though it's one of those things that's like, this was not the thing that you needed to think too hard about. I felt the same way with like the, tools and equipment list. Like, oh, I love that. Hey, here's what you can make with it. This is a fun list. I just sort of wish it was written in a way of like, here's some examples of what you can make with it. The Dungeon Master will tell you the DC instead of telling me it's a DC 10 check to emboss your belt. If you're making checks to emboss your belt and you fail, I do not give a shit.
Yeah,
let your player emboss their belt.
This sort of segues into a big picture thing, which is that it's not a huge deal, but some of the language is very awkward in the 5.5 player's handbook, the 2024 version, because they're still doing this thing that I hate, that I don't want to spend too much time.
The fence sitting.
Yes, the fence sitting, and I don't want to dwell too much on this because it's a little abstract, but there's ways of doing TTRPG rules, right? There's natural language, which Matt and I have talked about a lot, which is just you just say the thing, right? And then there's sort of mechanistic or keyword, a little bit more like programming, I guess, which is more like what Pathfinder does. Both are valid approaches. I have come to really enjoy the keyword heavy mechanistic version of games like Pathfinder, just because sometimes as a game master it's helpful, especially when referring to rules. What you absolutely should not do, in my opinion, is try to split the difference, and that is what D&D continues to do, to my great consternation. Sometimes they are just writing a sentence as if just describing a thing that happens, and then they will throw in what is obviously a keyword, and it's capitalized, and it reads awkwardly. And you should do one or the other. And this is one of my main gripes with how Wizards does things. They're fence sitting on this. Like Matt said, that's absolutely correct.
So, because so little has changed, the good news is it is, for the most part, not 100% easier to spot the key words when that word has a special non-natural meaning than it was in 2014, right? And we don't have time to get into it, but there's utilize and the magic action or something which have been keyworded out, and that's super useful.
That
right?
is useful. That is a useful change.
But Rob is absolutely right. It's just still on that line between just explain what the thing is. If a dispute comes up, you as the dungeon master will make a ruling, it's all in natural language, or that keyword thing. No, you should be able to understand exactly what this means. I think my biggest takeaway here is that this is a better version of the player's handbook. I like this one more than the other one that I have sitting over there. It's going to be more useful to me as a dungeon master. I am also, it's hard to feel too much joy because there's just so many missteps, right, of the edition that I felt like if some designers put some time into it, that they could have fixed. For example, here's just, if you don't get what my point is, heroic inspiration, right? It's not covered very much, and it's a re-roll of any D20. You can only have one at a time. If you get another one, you have to give it to yourself. It's encouraged that the Dungeon Master should give this out to the players. Except humans also get heroic inspiration at the beginning of every day. And except there's one feat that allows, of all the like abilities and spells in the game, there's one single feat that also gives players heroic inspiration if you play music for them at the end of the a long rest, which I guess, of course, excludes humans. Humans can't like vibe to the beat of music. Anyway, my point is you have a system that could either be one thing, hey, it's just the Dungeon Master stuff, or it could be integrated across a lot of things that require rerolls, like the lucky feat, or there's some class abilities like this to just kind of make it a standardized thing, right? Like advantage. But they didn't do that. And there's so many things that are just still niche cases for one thing or another. And that bugs me.
I agree very strongly about the missed opportunities of which there are many. You know, if I can just be candid here, I am sad that this is not actually a new edition, Matt. I
was ready to move on.
Sorry, am I jumping ahead?
Oh yeah, no. I was ready to move on from the edition, Rob.
Yeah, no. I was ready to be done with 5e, and I know why Wizards did not want to make a new edition.
It's popular.
It's been 10 years, right? Remember, the original PHB came out in 2014. That is not the longest, but like longer than average for a D&D edition. It is time, Matt. And the fact that they are now putting out 3 new books in 2024 and 2025 tells me that if we ever get a new edition, it's not going to be until 2030 or something, like at the earliest. And I'm not going to pretend like it's not true that I'm a 5e hater. I'm on this podcast all the time bitching about Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons and 5e and how I don't play it anymore, but I played it for a long time and I am fond of the game. And to me, this signals, a dearth of ideas, like a dying on the vine of any sort of like innovation or forward thinking or energy at Wizards of the Coast.
The biggest innovation I saw was that how to create verbal components.
Yes.
For me, that was it. Yeah.
I mean, there are some cool additions. There's not a single new idea in anywhere in this book. Even if you didn't like 5e had new ideas. 5e had innovations, not really like unique to the TTRPG space entirely, but new to D&D. This has nothing. This has nothing new. It shows absolutely no innovation. And what we've seen in the adventure design in the last year or two tells me that they're not going to be coming up with anything clever there either.
So, 2 things, Rob. One of the biggest changes, for example, between editions like 3 and 3.5 wasn't just the rules. It was like the publishing strategy of what they made.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember any of those 3.0 source books or adventures, but they didn't have color art. They mostly sucked. Like, they put more money into the splat books and the adventures, and that made a big shift in the game. And that's, I guess, a big unknown. It remains to be seen, is Wizards going to change any of their publishing strategy with this new edition? We just really can't know what they'll actually do.
They tried with the Spelljammer box set. That was a new idea or a new publishing, I guess, avenue. That wasn't very good, so that's not like a great example. But but this, if they're just going to release 3 books in the same format as they did 10 years ago, that's also like, that's not encouraging. This is the most well-resourced, well-established tabletop role-playing game company in the world by a significant margin. And now is a really exciting time to be a tabletop role-playing game player enthusiast, a lot of cool things are happening. And it is to me, it makes me sad that none of that is happening at Wizards of the Coast.
Well, I mean, if we look at the names on Wizards of the Coast, right, in the credits of this, I noticed 2 of them are no longer of the like people credited with the actual writing of the book are no longer with the company because they either got laid off or pushed out or who knows what. And then the other ones, the people on the masthead were around more or less for the first iteration of this game. But you also look at it, it's like also not that many people. So they are a well-resourced company, but I think a lot of those resources go into the more profitable parts, right? I mean, like marketing and hyping and creating toys and virtual tools, sort of forgetting that the foundation of all of this is like rules people enjoy playing. So,
Yeah.
If I was playing City Skylines Sim tabletop publisher, I would put more points into rules developers.
There's 5 designers, 3 rules developers, which is fewer than on many indie RPGs that we have read. Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. That's real. That's. Ugh.
Here's my second point about like being ready to move on. And I think, I don't know why neither of us could have seen this when we did like 3 or 4 episodes on the playtest as it developed. But if you do a playtest for a new edition and your primary mode of it is not a core group of playtesters, but the general public who gets a survey back to you, the general public for this new edition was mostly people who liked 5th edition, right? They took the survey because they were fans of 5th edition. And so, of course, I guess it's not surprising that the feedback they got from those people said, hey, give us the thing we already like again. So it's, I guess, under those sets of original choices and constraints, like these, we're not going to hire that many more people. And we're going to do this with a big survey to anyone who wants to take it. And most of the people who are going to take the time to take these huge surveys are people who are already fans of what is here. Well, it's not surprising that things didn't change that much.
And this, I think, is another missed opportunity, which, like I alluded to, I think that this book is good for new players, for first-time players of D&D, far better than the 2014 PHB. The problem is that I don't know that this is going to bring in any new players. Like I don't know that I don't know that that there's anything about this that is going to draw in anybody who's not already a D&D player.
Well, it was already sold out at your local gaming store, Rob, so maybe
because of people like me, Matt. Like, that's the thing. You're absolutely right, though. There's still enough nerds who will buy everything that Wizards publishes, but will it grow the hobby? And like, that's, that I don't think it will. And I think it should. And for all our complaints about original 5e, it grew the hobby,
I mean, it sucks because even if they were doing something like maybe they originally planned before they got all this feedback, right? I thought they had in some of the early playtest ideas enough like changes that would have added something more here where I think it would have got enough people excited to return to this game that it then would have grown the hobby by, them inviting their friends to play D&D, because that's the only way most people play D&D is someone invites them to play. And I was just thinking about like, oh, hey, like all these simplified class groupings and spell lists and even things that were introduced later in the playtest, like bastions, which it was, undercooked, but it was like a perfect idea. Like, put the rules in the game for like base building so that like everyone like has a goal to work for, right? Sure, they were poorly implemented, but if you had worked on them, they would have been really cool.
For what it's worth, I think I did read that will be in the DMG.
Oh, okay.
So
all right.
I think
that's a misstep in that. I think putting it in front of players would have been.
That's a big draw for
better.
players. I think that should be in the PHB. But like, this is part of the problem is that like Dungeon Master's Guide isn't coming out for months, and then the Monster Manual for months after that. I
think there's just no other way to do it with the way like printing works.
Yeah,
right?
but like
So.
the thing is, like, you, the DM, are now like left in limbo. You're
not. You can just continue playing with whatever rules you have, right?
Sure. I think that the fact that it does not come with anything for the DM to work with is a problem.
We kind of skipped over a lot of the specifics, but I think people who are probably disagreeing with us might point out that pretty much every class got buffed, not just like in terms of raw power, but in terms of like quality of life. If you're a person who's like, I like playing a rogue, I wish it wasn't such a crappy class. I like playing a fighter. I wish it wasn't such a crappy class. Like, all these things improved slightly, right?
Yeah.
I want more flexibility when creating my characters. I don't want these weird, outdated ability score adjustments tied to something that's called in the rulebook race, right? All those things have been changed, and that's a pretty big improvement. But again, we've found this fine line where so little has changed that you just might feel like, man, there's just not enough new here for me. Why would I buy myself and, make my players buy new versions of the players' handbooks? Now, however, the change in the layout to the rules is almost enough to sell it for me. If Wizards sold $3, I would pay $5 pamphlets, right? Because one of the changes in the layouts is like all the rules for your class, including spell lists, are right there next to the class. That had all the information in the class plus short descriptions of every spell there. So they're like, 15-page, not hardcover pamphlets. I would switch to this in an instant and buy each one of those for my players so that they had all the class rules for their class right there.
I'm of two minds about this because, like we've said, this is so much better than the 2014 PHB and is actually like a useful book for players that I think teaches them how to play, provides examples. I really like how all the examples of play, they've got these little like numbered sections next to the like descriptive text so that when, Jaden or whoever says I'm attacking the orc, there's a little like sidebar that says he's rolling this to do that. I think that's really, really good. I think this is super good for teaching the game. So like if you're bringing in new players or you're a new player, this is totally worth it. I just like, even though I would much rather have this than the one that I have, I don't know that I could justify to myself buying it. Like I don't, there's just like not enough that is different. I mean, I've already bought it, but like, you know what I mean? Like,
it's too late, Rob.
Even though it's better, I personally don't like, I don't get a new phone until mine dies. Like, I don't buy a new console until the next one is like on sale. Like, I'm not an early adopter. So if you are, I think this has like enough to like recommend it. So like it's worth buying. But like, if you are at all like somebody who likes deals or like wants to get their money worth, I can't really recommend buying this.
I sort of said at the beginning of this episode, I want to answer the question because I think of the two of us, I think you've run more 5e games than me, campaigns and like probably total sessions. But of the two of us, I'm the only one who's running a 5e campaign right now.
That's true. This is currently abstract for me. I'm not running any 5e campaigns at the moment.
I think the answer is probably eventually. Like when I get around to
sure
it. Like I'm not so excited about having better descriptions for the magic, use and stuff that I'm like, I got to get these new rules in front of my players and have everyone like tweak their character sheets and copy their old character sheets over to the new, actually, I think much better laid out character sheets where you could fit everything on one page front and back. That's actually pretty great. It's good, but it's not so good that I won't do it. I'm not going to do it for my next session. Like, I just don't care enough to change, but I probably will. Probably by the end of the year, I'll make sure whenever we have a session where I'm not like, all right, no one has to leave early. Let's start. Let's convert our characters, and then we'll continue on. But like, again, it's not a big enough deal or enough of a change. I'm gonna do it. And I'm probably going to wait until I have compiled my complete beginning list of things that need to be immediately house ruled at my table. Like, I don't know, the wording of hiding. Like, I don't understand how the hide action works anymore. I got to like figure that out and then probably change it.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in our crunchier rules breakdown because, that one's a doozy.
I think we also, we might have to do a whole nother episode besides talking about art, besides talking about crunchy rules, about like what easy changes in house rules would you make immediately to this book?
Yeah.
Hey, so I guess I did answer the question. I am going to change to this new book. Oh wait, is that finally? Oh, did you hear that ding, Rob? I've been running a comparison program. So ever since there's been some recent scandals in role-playing game publishing over plagiarism. So I thought I'd put the Player's Handbook 24 through the checker. Oh no, Rob! It says match text 54.2%. It's saying it's plagiarizing from another book, the Player's Handbook 2014. Well, they're going to have an awful lawsuit on their hands, Rob. That's pretty bad. Ooh, okay. Rob's telling me we're going to cut that little bit.
No.
I have enjoyed talking about this new handbook with you, Rob.
It's good. I don't know if 54% is more or less than I expected. It's
listeners. I was too lazy to run the whole thing. I literally just ran the spells A through B through it because otherwise it was going to take too long. So don't come at me at the accuracy of that 54.2%.
There's the first of at least 2 episodes about the PHB, the new Player's Handbook 5.25, 5.5, 5e plus, Player's Handbook 2024, whatever you want to call it.
50th anniversary, Dungeons and Dragons.
Look, I'm not gonna hide my disappointment. I'm disappointed. I had hoped for more. I'd hoped to be surprised. There were no surprises. Everything that they told us was going to be in it was in it, and nothing new. And very little innovation, and I am sad about that. But,
there were many missteps, many things that could have been fixed that weren't. They fixed the layout of the book that I think will be enough for a lot of people, and I know it will eventually be enough for me to switch over. But again, like we were joked about at the beginning of the episode, who care? Really, run whatever game or edition you've been running. Like we said, Rob and I have been through enough edition changes. No, it doesn't matter. Just keep running the other one you have. And honestly, it matters even less this time because guess what? Backwards compatibility also in this case is going to mean frontwards compatibility. So if a new thing comes out, there's no reason why you have to have this Player's Handbook to use it.
Yeah.
I wonder if they thought about that. Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to hear more of us talking about the Player's Handbook, including a future video episode and over 36 hours of back premium episodes, you can head to patreon.com/dungeonmasterofnone, $5 a month, link in the show notes.
If you have other thoughts for us, you want to chat with other like-minded DMs, you can join our Discord. It's free. Link in the show notes. You can email us at dmofnone@gmail.com. As always, thanks for listening. and keep rolling them dice.
You know what I'm most disappointed, Rob? Actually, I've changed my answer. Is I don't know if you noticed this, but the little snarky joke disclaimer at the front of the book that's been in every 5e book, it's gone.
They don't have one. They're too serious for the PhD.
They've truly gone woke, Rob.
Can't even have jokes anymore because of woke.
Every time I thought I got it made, it seemed the taste was not so sweet. So I turned myself to face me, but I've never caught a glimpse how the others must see the faker. I'm much too fast to take that test. Changes. Turn and face the strain. Changes. Don't wanna be a richer man. Changes. Turn and face the strain. Changes. It's gonna have to be a different